The next person has told so many great stories from the stage of a club I think most of us have been to when he's introducing a band. He's got such great knowledge of music. It's unbelievable. But not only that, he's worked in the Obama administration, and he's been a teacher for many, many years. And he's also worked as a liaison for numerous activists, protesters, and opposition groups, ensuring that they respectfully receive a voice at the table with the Obama administration. He's a man that's kind of a Renaissance man. I want to quickly get back to the stories that he tells from the stage, though. You know, they're funny, and they sometimes you're like, let's get to the band already, but they're a lot of fun. One time at Pitchfork, Yoko Ono was there, and a bunch of us were on the side of the stage, and he was going to come up and introduce Yoko Ono. And I don't know if he was because it was in the presence of Yoko Ono or what, and it was magical the way he introduced Yoko Ono, because all he did, he said, Yoko Ono, and everybody was, wow, that's his introduction. That is great. It's so succinct and it's wonderful. Here he is with a great story, I'm sure. Tim Tuten of the Hideout.
I really should have prepared better for this. And when I was asked about it, I thought, I've had time to prepare, but I was thinking, I should do A Tale of Two Cities, which was an important book to me, or I should do, I can't think about it. The other book that I love so much. Anyway, now I can't think straight. Because I thought, ultimately, I'm just going to tell you the book that really affected me the most, all right? And the book, it's really great that Tony mentioned how he was affected by this Judy Blume book when he was 12. And Annalise said that when she was 11, she was reading Hiroshima by John Keiser. I had to read it in high school. Okay, but we were 11 years old. So when I was 11 years old, I was in 5th grade. And an 11-year-old is like a 5th grader, 6th grader, and it's that weird age where you're like older, you're not reading kiddie books, but you're like 11, 12 years old, you're not in middle school yet. So I was 11, and the thing I was most excited about when I was 11, it was 1971, okay? So I'm 56 years old. I was born in 1960, and I was finally able to join the Boy Scouts, okay? And I was so excited about that because my friends and my brothers were in it, and they got to go camping, and they got to light fires, and they got to do all this really cool stuff that guys outside, they would talk about building towers with wood and ropes and everything, and they'd go to Wisconsin. So I was super excited about getting out of here and going there to this, to being a Boy Scout and earning merit badges, and I was really into it. And so it was 1971, and my big brother, he was 8 years older than me. He was 19 years old, and he was going to college. And this isn't like a setup. I just didn't have my stuff prepared. But, it's not like I'm working with props. But anyway, so the book my brother read nothing but science fiction. He was totally into Isaac Asimov and Ray Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke. And I, even as a kid, was like, you don't know it at the time, but I was just like, I'm into social realism, okay? I think Dickens. But anyway, he was into science fiction, but he had this book. And this is a book by Abby Hoffman, and it's called Steal This Book. And my brother went to college down at Bradley, and while he was gone, I thought, oh my God, steal this book. I'm going to steal his book. And I looked at this book, and in this book, it was so crazy because I was a 5th grader, and the book was called Steal This Book, and in it, there was all these crazy cartoons, and there were all these crazy photographs, and here's one, strike, 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 and here's the one I love the most. there's Boy Scouts here, okay? And there's 3 Boy Scouts all going like this at attention. And then on the other side, it's like, and this is like our Crumb, one of those crazy cartoons in the 70s. And it's like, and then it says, before, Boy Scouts, after, and they're all dope smokers. And they're all weed smokers. And I was like, I looked at that at 11 in 1971 like, okay, that's awesome, all right? That would be good. And then later in this book, Abby Hoffman has this picture where I tried to like pull this all out, I knew this was going to happen, I was afraid. He has a photograph here where, oh, there it is, where in this photograph here, he's making the salute like a Boy Scout, and on his hand it says, fuck Army, all right? And then underneath it, the caption says, yes, sir, you know? And so when I was in 5th grade, I brought this to school, and I was showing it to my friends, and basically like an immature boy, I was like, check this out, fuck Army, all right? Check this out, there's cartoons about smoking dope. And then there's like in here, there's directions. This is how to make a pipe bomb, okay? And in it, it shows you how to do it, which we did, all right? You go to restaurants and you say, I'm collecting matches. And then you collect a lot of matches. You cut the heads off them, and then you pack all the matches into a pipe. And you take a fuse from an M80, and you drill the hole first. And he jokes about that. Don't drill the hole after you shove the dynamite, the stuff in. Make sure you drill the hole first, tape it around. You can use Elmer's glue, and then pack it with match heads. And then you light it, run, and it blows up. And he explains all these things. And it was all written, it was so timely to me because it was written in Cook County Jail in 1970. And growing up in Chicago and Cook County, I was like, this is right here. My brother was playing this album by B.B. King live from Cook County Jail, you know? And the Chicago 7 trial was about to start. And so I just looked at this book, and I started, at first I was taken in by the photographs and the cartoons and the jokes. And then when I started reading it, you know, I was like, all right. And that's the brilliance and beauty. Sorry, I should have shown you this, but this is Abby Hoffman, okay? And it didn't even hit me until later that, like, he's wearing a snap button cowboy shirt, blue jeans, a wide belt, and a t-shirt. And it's like, I didn't get that from like a hipster pitchfork thing, all right? It's like, I'm like, I guess I dress like him. And this is a photograph that Richard Avedon took in 1972 when he did a Rolling Stone photograph thing of like who's who in 72. And he had pictures of George McGovern and other people. And this photo I hung up on my wall in my bedroom. And I just looked at him, and my dad just figured he's another weird rock star guy. And I kind of looked at him like that. And then I hung it up in my classroom when I became a high school teacher in Chicago Public Schools for 20 years. And then I took it to Washington, D.C. for the last 6.5 years when I was working there, okay? And the thing is, what Abby Hoffman did in his book was, it's a humorous book. He's really, really funny, but he said all these serious things. And I just look at some of the things that I penciled in, you know, that he wrote. And he writes, like one of the things I penciled in when I was in 5th grade was, the purpose of part 2 is not to fuck the system, but destroy it. And I have an exclamation point next to that. This is like, am I being a bratty kid? But it's how you start to think about it. And then he says, and this hurt so much later in his life, but I was older then. He said, revolution is not about suicide, it's about life. And I remember thinking that it's about, the revolution is about changing our lives. It's about making lives better. And as a high school teacher and as a person growing up, I remember thinking like, you know, I don't know, but it just seemed natural to me. We have to do something that's revolutionary, something. And he even jokes about this thing. He says, smoking dope and hanging up Che's picture is no more a commitment than drinking milk and collecting postage stamps. And as a 5th grader, I drank a lot of milk. I had a stamp collection, a rock collection, a shell collection. And I remember that he said that, and like, I never stopped thinking about what he said. Like when we come in and we drink Revolution beer, love these guys, love it. I own a bar, I sell Revolution beer. And they have all this anti-hero IPA. And they use the iconography of 60s and radical revolutionary stuff to commodify it and sell stuff. It's like I always look at that and I'm like, Abby said, the fact that you do that, doesn't mean. And so, and then he like goes on to talk about how this book was rejected by 30 different publishing houses. On the front, he's got this awesome Random House being blown up here, but he says that 30 different publishing houses turned down his manuscript, and he said, especially the jive rap I got from so-called liberals, who after, quote, thinking it over, said that this won't add to freedom of speech, it will end it, okay? And I remember thinking the rest of my life, liberals bullshit you, all right? They always tell you, I really like your book, but I really can't do that. It's like, and then they talk about, and he goes on to talk about the swearing and everything like that. And then he says, the next book I'm going to have is Steal the White House. And then he lists his co-conspirator, he says aiding and abetting. And this is a really weird thing, but he lists these people, Tim Leary, and I remember reading his list of all the people that helped him. He has Timothy Leary, Pat Solomon, and then he has like Troy, Susan, Marty. He doesn't have their last name. And then he says Janice, Jimmy, Dylan. I was like, okay, that's got to be Janis Joplin. It's got to be Bob Dylan. That's got to be I got to listen. This is before they were dead, right? And then he says Bernadine Dorn, okay? In the first line, she's here tonight, right? And so I don't know her, but I mean, that's kind of freaked me out when I saw that. I started looking at this list of people, Malcolm X that he mentions, and he goes on, and I was like, this is the people that I need to find out who they are, and then I need to study. And then he goes into the cities, and he has these sections, how to buy marijuana, And he was like, don't ever buy marijuana unless you smoke from the bag that the joint is it 7 minutes? So, but he says in it, he goes on to say, if you get ripped off buying speed or heroin, you're a pig, because people who use speed and heroin are pigs. So don't use it, they're horrible drugs. And I remember as a young kid thinking like, that's what I needed. You could have self-righteous Christian parents tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but Abby was honest about what to do. So his honesty, his humor, and his sensibility about it never ends. It constantly goes on. Be careful about what people are saying, but the real revolution is about making lives better. That's what made me a high school teacher, and then that's what helped me when I went into communications, because when I was in Washington, D.C. for 6.5 years, and the protesters would come, my job was to work with outside organizations, and I was like, every time, I was like, these are the guys. Because I read this book, I was able to look at them, respect, and know that we have a common communication. We're thinking for the same thing, and we're fighting to make what's right. So, sorry to go too late.